Privacy. Privacy. You have no privacy.
Why do you think that?
Because security is a pain in the ass. Now you're going to load all of this stuff on my computer and tell me I'm secure. No, because I'm still in the equation.
I would like to link that to the concept of responsibility.
What is their level of responsibility to protect themselves? And this is where I get kind of pissed off. Yeah, it's your responsibility to recognize when somebody's trying to take advantage of you, somebody's trying to defraud you, somebody's trying to manipulate you, and learning how to recognize that manipulation. It's the same issues, just instead of going after computers, they're going after this.
What advice would you give parents in general to protect their children from the dangers of the internet?
What do you want his internet experience to be like? You have to start with
Winn Schwartau, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
You've had quite a fascinating career, from starting as an audio engineer quite a while ago to becoming a pioneer in cybersecurity. And there's also a few terms that you coined, that were coined to you in the field, including a very famous one that was associated with you when you came in front of the US Congress to give them a warning. I'm sure we'll get into that later today. You've also written a couple of books that focus on subjects like internet security, privacy, and cyber terrorism. With all of that in mind, let me start with the first question. What do you love about technology and security, and what drove you to them?
I grew up a geek. My parents were both engineers. I got non-optional education on various types of engineering from my father. Got a couple old pictures of that. My mother, we had a recording studio at home, so she trained me on how to do all this stuff, and we had radios and stuff, and so I was attracted to it very, very early, and so it's just kind of always been that way. Oh, new technology, cool, let's go play with it. I don't understand that one, teach me about it, please. And that ended up many years ago, later, really working out very well in the hacker community, because I kind of had that early mindset. Oh, let's break it, let's try it, engineering. And thanks to my parents, that really worked out when the hacking community began to grow.
What was your first computer?
I built one when I was 9 years old, and it was an analog computer. And all it could do was, as I remember, it could add, subtract, multiply, and divide. That was all it could do. But it got me really hooked into technology. I built my first one, I think it was an IMSA that first did. It was an IMSA, 1972, where you programmed machine language in the front of it. God, I was awful. I hated that thing. It was awful. And then in the audio and the TV production world, a lot of the computers in the back end were old DECs, old PDPs, where you got to do the machine language programming except on a keyboard.
Okay.
Oh, then the Fortran at the university. Yeah, I mean, there was things. And then the first one that I actually went out and bought, I think, for myself was a Commodore PET.
That was before the Commodore 64?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, this was 77, 78, I think.
Oh man, that's a while back.
And it had 16K of RAM. It had two 180 floppies, 5 1/4. And it had a cassette deck. So things were a little different back then.
Yeah, those big 5 3/4 inch? 5.5 inch?
5 1/4. These were single-sided floppies.
Man, I actually don't know this. So when you talk about maybe I've used it, but not consciously. When you say analog computer, what is an analog computer?
An analog computer is, in this case, it was a lot of resistors, and some other components, and you can dial numbers. How much is 3 times 5?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get an answer over here on voltmeters where it tells you these numbers. It's sort of like an abacus in some ways. You can keep moving things around and changing them, but you're doing it all yourself. It's like volume controls. And so the first really popular analog computer was made in Poland in the late 60s.
In Poland.
And instead, and this gets a little geeky here, but
Mm-hmm.
instead of using bits and bytes and ones and zeros, it can use any number in the middle just by adjusting a knob.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do the mathematical functions, it uses a combination of integrators and differentiators, and you patch together the circuits, and voila, you have an analog computer. I know that doesn't explain a lot because there's not many of them around, but we're playing with them again now.
In what sense?
Well, digital computers are a huge waste of energy. Massive amount. The typical computer that we've got, I think, calculates out to 19 digits. So every time your CPU and you're doing anything, it's wasting most of that energy and calculation power in digits that are of no real use to you. So most of the problems that we face in your financials, you need 2 significant digits. That can be handled on an analog computer very easily because you don't need the 19.
Yeah.
So as soon as you go to an analog computer, which is very similar to what they used on the Apollo mission, at that point, you're saving an incredible amount of power, massive amounts of power, and we need to be incredibly better about being green these days. And it's faster because you don't have to do calculations. The calculations are automatic in the circuit. It's like when you're on a soundboard and you're doing volume and EQ and adjusting sounds. They're not calculating; they're instantaneous because they're part of the circuit, and that's the way analog computing works. So there's huge advantages to it, to doing it not for every problem, but for a good number of where 2 digits or 3 digits is good enough. That's close enough.
Yeah. It's either true or false. Yeah.
So it's not binary, and then that makes it easier to work with statistics, probability, which is the world we live in. It makes it just a lot easier, not for every case in the world, but the principle is there, and that can be applied. A lot of great work being done that in Purdue University that's coordinating with some universities in Japan on this as well.
And what kind of technology could you put that in right now? Because I can imagine that if you take, for example, a the chip in a Tesla car, or if you take a video game console, or if you take any of those machines that do a lot of calculations, I assume that going back to analog would not be a perfect solution there because it would undermine whatever it is that you're trying to do. So what kind of applications could you use it on?
Industrial control systems.
Right.
Where,
Okay.
let's say you want to regulate, you guys in Amsterdam, you have to regulate the flow of the water in and out and clean out the canals and what have you. Does that need 19 digits of precision to do? No. If you look at some of the wave calculation machines and the tidal machines and computers that were used in the 1880s and 1890s, they were mechanical. Mechanical systems like this are analog. They worked and in many cases, these are still being used in many places around the world because they were so reliable. So in cases like that, your industrial control systems don't need all the digital stuff. There are other approaches that can be done. We have just, as a society and as engineers, we've said, oh, we have this. This is what we'll use all the time. And with now what energy is taking up and computing, 2 to 3% of the planet's energy right now, we gotta really start cutting back and looking at some alternatives.
Yeah, and I'm sure, and this is also I'm trying to stay away from that from now because else we'll delve into this rabbit hole. But I think from a security perspective, it also makes a lot of sense to go back to simpler systems, because the more complex a system is, the harder it is to maintain, the harder it is to keep it updated. Which is also I think the reason why, and maybe this is outdated information for now, but I believe that for a long time, and maybe still right now, nuclear facilities and nuclear power plants, they are running on very, not necessarily outdated information, but they are running on very much more simple, I suppose, in their complexity, just to prevent, just to make it more easily maintainable, to disconnect it from internet and to make sure that it can't be hacked or attacked from outside.
It is very difficult to hack an analog circuit.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a light bulb, a dimmer, battery, light bulb, volume, light control. That's a complete analog system that gives you everything from roughly 0 to full on. How do you hack it?
Yeah, you don't.
So, but now I put a digital switch in the circuit next to the battery that'll say, okay, I can turn this on or off.
Mm-hmm.
If I turn it off, then my knob doesn't work. I turn it on, the knob does work. How do you hack that? You go after the digital circuits at the front end of the analog system.
Yeah, the worst you can do probably as an attacker of that system is you can do two things. You can either overload the system, which makes all the light bulbs explode, or you can shut off the power so none of them work. You can do one of the two, but there's not much else.
It makes it really difficult, and it's an entirely different kind of problem to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not there yet. The work has been going on, but there's not been a lot of adaptation yet. I'm going to guess maybe quantum computing may help bring in some more analog thinking.
So you grew up very interested in technology, not necessarily in security yet, I believe, but you were, in your own words, a geek. You played around with it, you broke it, you built it, you see how it worked, and those kind of things.
Yeah.
If you fast forward, I know that in 1991 you went to the U.S. Congress to give them a warning. And that warning had something to do, and we'll dive into this a little bit later, had something to do with how the world should look at cybersecurity, which was starting to become an issue, or was already an issue, arguably. What led up to that? So can you describe the events that led up to that moment, both in your involvement? So how did you become involved in cybersecurity, and what led up to it?
Oh boy, those are all different questions. I got involved in it through a buddy sitting at a bar one night, and one thing led to another, and that was back in '83. And then I fell in love with the field, fell in love with it. So, but prior to that, security, it's locks and doors like everybody else. So over the next few years, I was doing some work with the DoD here in the U.S., some stuff with the MOD, UK, with your MOD. I was playing a lot of stuff around in Europe, and it was largely the military and intelligence community that was caring about security. And so I got involved in a number of projects, and then, this is going to sound crazy, I do a lot of my thinking in the shower, so no imagery required. Please don't think about that. But for me, it's very freeing. And it's going to sound crazy. I had a vision in the shower, whether that was my brain or the universe talking, who knows, doesn't matter. And it was like viruses, computer viruses. Well, what if, okay, there's a lot of them. There were like 100 then, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what if I was a bad guy? What if I was a bad guy with 3? What if I was a bad guy with 5? What if I was a bad guy that could also get hold and infiltrate a software distribution floppy disk center? So I'm distributing, because this is really way before the internet was doing anything. How would I distribute it? And so one thing, and what if I did this? Now, how could I intercept all of these signals in an analog way that's undetectable? So I went through pure geeking out. How much could a bad guy actually do without having to break into systems? It was all analog techniques. And at that point, I realized that we were facing at that point, maybe still are, an electronic Pearl Harbor, that most of the planet was completely defenseless against any sort of cyber attacks, coordinated offense, dealing with global bad guys. And that's what I presented to Congress. I said, this is where we're going. This is what is going to happen unless we start taking some action now. And that was 34 years ago, and we know how good security is today.
Okay, so that action was taken after you made that warning to Congress.
It took a long time. That's the problem. They called me a chicken little. They said, you're overstating the problem. It'll never be that bad. And the one question that I'll never forget, one of the congressmen asked me, Mr. Schwartau, can you please explain to this committee why the bad guys would ever want to use the internet?
Why not?
Well, this was political thinking versus what I was saying versus what at the time Al Gore was saying, the electronic superhighway for everybody. It'll be safe. It'll be great. Everything's going to be wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying the exact opposite. And Al Gore and I lived close to each other, and I'd met him on airplanes, and we didn't like each other, but nobody wanted to listen. The only people that really paid a lot of attention back in those days was in the military, government, and intelligence communities. The private sector was still asking itself the question, do you think we should connect to the internet? So these are really early days, and I was posing a question that still today is unanswered. How do you do security? We don't know. We're still guessing how to do it.
This is super interesting because I was actually born in 1991. So a couple of months before you gave the speech to US Congress and before you made the term electronic Pearl Harbor. So from my perspective, and I think we have a little bit of a similar background because I was also a kid that grew up with a very big interest in machines and in tinkering and in building and in breaking them every now and then. I remember very fondly that my first computer I literally blew up because there was a red switch behind the computer, right? And I'm not even sure about this, but I think that switch was meant to switch between the power input depending on where you were. And I had a problem with that machine, and I remember it very fondly. The monitor was showing all blue, I believe, and I couldn't figure out why. Everything was blue, and so I was trying to figure it out. I was pulling every button, pushing everything that I could push, and then I saw that switch. I flipped it, and it blew up. It completely fried. The whole motherboard was broken.
Bad circuit design. Very poor early circuit design.
I think many computers were blown up like that by people that didn't know what they were doing.
I did blow a lot of stuff up when I brought it over from the U.S. to Europe and didn't have the right mind. I blew a lot of stuff up. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Anyway, what I remember, and maybe you can flesh this out a little bit for me. So there is a similar background. I was also playing around with very specific malware very early on, and a very good example I can give there is Sub7. I believe that was in 97, 98-ish when it first came out, which was a piece of software, malware, a virus, or whatever you want to call it, that you could be the host of that. You would install Sub7 on the computers around school or around whatever, and you would be the host. And then on a distance, you could do whatever you wanted with those computers. You could wipe the hard drives, you could download files, you could open and close their CD-ROM drives, that kind of stuff. Really fun, because no computer at school back then had an antivirus. So yeah, you can guarantee that most of the computers at school were infected with Sub7 back then. Was a lot of fun. But it seemed to me that in that time, people were kind of, not really that much, but they were kind of aware of the dangers of the internet, right? You had hackers going around, doing their thing. You had a couple of very famous hackers back in the day, and they were doing their thing. but it wasn't really daily news yet. It wasn't really burned into the minds of people yet. Like, hey, you have to watch out for phishing, or for people that come for your bank account or stuff like that. So can you flesh it out for me? When you gave that warning to Congress, what did the landscape look like then? What do you think the general attitude of the general population towards internet security was back then?
We don't know what a computer is. I'm scared of computers. I don't know what the internet is. Whatever it is, it's got to be bad.
Mm,
This is all science for science for PhDs and geeks. I'll never need a computer. It was like that. There was a small. I mean, the hacking community was incredibly small if you go by any gauge. When you look at DEF CON in, I think it was 93, 94, the first one, there were less than 100 people, but that was 100 that had not gotten together before. Um, the only real piece of security that I was aware of that existed in those days was government, military, and intelligence community. They were working on Tempest systems. They were working, encryption was part of it, but nobody at home, mom and pop, they don't know well, we didn't even have that many. Yeah, some credit cards. They didn't know that there was a little tiny bit of security going on the back end. There were banking standards for security. There were a few other things, but it wasn't this 300 billion dollar industry we have today. It was thinking about it.
yeah, so you can make the argument that based on that the significance of what you were saying during that Congress speech was not being recognized by most people.
By the vast majority of people. There were a few leaders. We met up, we did some work, did some experiments, did very, very early pioneering work, most of which nobody today knows about or cares about. And that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
We were having fun with technology and geeking out and learning.
Mm-hmm. Did you also get in the middle of it? So did you? Okay, so let's define what you actually did. So did you just research what was going on? Because you mentioned you were doing thinking in private, and you made some realization and you brought those forward. Did you also look at the other side of the fence, let's say? So did you, for example, work together with hackers to get some proof of concept, to see how it works, what they do exactly, what the strategy behind it is, how to do social engineering, all those sorts of things? Did you also see that side?
Absolutely. I think I mentioned earlier that Access for All and Hactic was the other one back in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
My first visit there, I think, was in '89 because the hacking scene was very active over here. I mean, over there, sorry. And I knew some people in Army intelligence that thought they were going to digital war with some of the people I knew over in notably the Netherlands, more so than the UK. And what we finally was able to do with InfoWarcon was let's get the military, let's get business, let's get law enforcement, let's get the hackers and put them all together and see what happens. And that was really the first attempt to try to get everybody to talk about the issues that existed in the day and try to look forward. So it was a lot of fun doing that. But how much good did it really do? I don't think it did a lot. I think some of the early days, we ignored so many of the early problems that were so obvious. And no, that's not really a problem. Nobody cares. And the number of people that had any sort of vision for the future of what this was going to become.
What were some of those problems that were very obvious?
How about enforcing login passwords on government systems?
Mm.
I mean, dumb stuff. Really, really dumb stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an early form of what we call today identity management. We didn't have that sophistication back then, but the sheer number of computers on the internet, in the private sector, in universities, government, etc., that had no front door at all, no lock,
Mm-hmm.
and astounding. Absolutely astounding. Well, nobody really cares about us. Okay, if that's what you want to believe. And that was probably the worst one in the very beginning. Then after that, obviously, was access control. And from the government standpoint, how do you separate secret, top secret information from unclassified information and make them work on the same computer and same network? And so that was a tough problem. It still is a tough problem. And that gets sort of in many ways back to analog. In many cases, the air gap.
Mm.
Don't let them touch each other. Don't let them talk to each other. Same thing that happened with Airbus. I don't know, 10 years ago. Uh, somebody allegedly hacked the entertainment system on an airplane going across the pond and broke into the avionics system because they were using the same wire and they were only using quote unquote logical separation between avionics and entertainment. So when I was talking to the Airbus people about this, they actually hang out at a hacker bar in Paris. And I was talking to them about it. They all up and left. They said, we can't talk about it. We can't talk about it. That's wrong. And again, the easy problems to solve. And that has always been security's problem. Let's find the easy way out.
Yeah, and I think to some degree that still very much is true today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because security is a pain in the ass.
But in general, I think that's, and this is from my personal field, I've been in IT since the beginning of my career. So I'm 34 right now, started when I was 16, so a good 18 years. And it seems to me that companies generally that are not IT focused, so not technology companies or hosting companies or any of those kind of companies, but more, let's say, consulting companies or governments or those kind of companies. The amount of funding generally in the companies that I've seen that goes towards IT is peanuts compared to the business side. And security is a very small part of the IT budget.
That has always been the case.
Which is very funny because right now, in today's age, I think everybody, at least everybody younger than, let's say, 40 or 50, something like that, they know the danger of the internet. They hear stories every day. Yesterday in Netherlands, there was a story coming forward about someone losing 50,000 euros to a phishing attack, where he provided his security code to somebody who he had on the phone, and 29 transactions were done over the course of I think 2 hours or something like that, and 50,000 euros was drained. That stuff still happens.
I had a kid I grew up with. He contacted me through a dear friend of mine who I grew up with, who now lives in Groningen. Groningen? And
Groningen, yeah.
I can't speak Dutch.
The hard G.
Nobody can. Nobody.
Yeah.
And so John called Howie. Howie called me, and he had been pig slaughtered for $7.2 million.
Man.
And he didn't believe. The problem was he didn't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
It was in complete denial. Didn't understand the technology and didn't understand the emotional manipulation that he had been going under and had been done to him. It was what we call in the U.S. a long con, a long play. You're not trying to get somebody like a bar trick. I'm going to get your $20 and run out of the bar tomorrow. But it took months, and they got him for 7.2 million. And now he was my age, and now he has to go back to work. And
it's brutal.
Yeah, and these are what I call we all call the low-hanging fruit, some of the obvious stuff. And that's why I've really shifted so much of my work. Here's the help for you into cognitive security, because cognitive security, how we think, what we believe, and how we react, is today's cybersecurity. And we need to get all these systems working together, which goes back to your earlier question about I was in the early days. What did I do? I was never a programmer. I sucked. I was awful. But I could map out the system and show, okay, this does this, and I need this to do, and here it is, and this is it. And that came from my audio career of systems, everything in audio. You look at the huge the mixing board, the video.
Mm-hmm.
I knew how they worked. I could see underneath, and okay, so that was my gift, was to understand the systems. And so I never had to code. I'm doing some coding now for fun with AI, just to break my brain, but I'm not a coder. I'm doing it for a learning reason. So I've always looked at the world of security and technology, IT and all that. I see the systems, and I can see all the pieces, and I can zoom in and that, but each of the individuals with that's where the real experts are, that can go find the semicolon in the code, or know how to point to the file that's over there on DHCP. I can speak the language, but I don't know how to execute it down at the code level.
Yeah, you mentioned the low-hanging fruit, and you can use it in multiple contexts. You can look at low-hanging fruit in the sense of what are the easy things you can do in order to strengthen your security. But you can also look at it from a bad actor perspective. So which people are the most vulnerable and can be exploited the most effectively?
People my age. The amount of number of attacks that are going, social engineering, phishing, in that whole area, are they're going after people with that are age groups, populations that are supposed to be weak in the mind,
Mm-hmm.
or have less abilities, and that is older folks. So that is an easy database to get a hold of these days on the dark web. All right, I want everybody over 60. I want everybody over 60 who lives in the zip code. They got money. And if there was an add stupid switch, they would can just get me the stupid people. So
Yeah.
now they're targeting, of course, it is hyper targeted by the bad guys, just as product companies hyper focus and hyper target the audiences they want to sell their stuff to. It's exactly the same thing. And they're emotionally manipulating both audiences.
Let me ask you a question related to responsibility. Because I, just like anybody, I know people that know nothing about internet, computers, smartphones, whatever. And in my case, for example, my father-in-law is one of those people. He just has a smartphone just because he has to for a certain bank account, right? Because they don't allow in-person banking anymore, so he needs to use that app. And every time he uses it, he calls someone else to help him out with it. If he has to send an email, he calls someone, can you please help me with sending this email? That's the kind of person he is. If he gets a phone call from a person that tells him that he is a bank employee and he needs to take action now or else he will lose 5,000 euros or something like that, right? Just the typical the conversation that if you and I would get those, and many other people probably listening to this conversation, they will be like, yeah, you would never believe that. But the point is, people that don't have that experience, they can be, like you said, emotionally manipulated. And to tie this to because I love that idea, to tie this to your concept of cognitive security, I would like to link that to the concept of responsibility. If a person like that is being victimized, do you think they are responsible for it? And the second question is, what could or should they have done, or what should they do right now in order to make themselves more to optimize their cognitive security in your terms?
Oh boy. All right, that's 22 questions that requires you to come to Orange Con so I can show you how it all works.
Let's start with responsibility. Is he responsible?
Responsibility goes back to any aspect of any society. Oh, red lights, they're meaningless. I don't need to look at them. I can drive right through. All right, today it's illegal, fine, but does that stop people from misbehaving on the road, from not acting responsibly? No. In a culture like the Netherlands, what is it? Bikes first, people second. than cars, or it's something like that. But it's a different cultural mindset of how you pay attention, and you're supposed to take social responsibility for participating in that society.
Hmm.
It's the same question now when we're adding complex technology on top of it. Uh, should everybody at home, everybody who is not technologically fluent and enjoys it like many of us do, what is their level of responsibility to protect themselves? And this is where I get kind of pissed off. We in the IT industry, from phones, computers, software, the whole thing, we add more and more and more features, make it do more and more, make it more complicated. Don't build in security. Assume that people can learn all of this crap on their own. And then you end up with an entire population of, none of this works. Please help me. It's because we as the industry screwed up.
Yeah.
We made this stuff
Hmm.
so hard. We made it for ourselves. We didn't make it for people that aren't technical and aren't um, really want to get into the weeds and learn how this works. They just want to make a phone call. They want to make a text. Now, is all that technology? No, a huge amount of that is cognitive. So I grew up in New York City, and the first time that I got mugged, I think I was 8 years old. Some kid came up to me with a knife and said, "Give me all your money." And I think I had 50 cents, 30 cents, maybe the equivalent of a guilder way back then. That was about it. But in the city, you become very aware of hostility, threats, what have you.
Hmm.
City smarts, you've probably heard that expression. Then the next one that I tell people is, you know what three-card monte is, that gambling game where they hustle you?
Is that with the ping pong ball under the thing?
Oh, you can do it with a ping pong ball under a cup, or with three cards, and you always have to find the queen. Same game.
Mm? Oh, right. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And so when I was, I don't know, 15, I was down in Times Square, and I can see, I got it. I'm smart. I can figure this out. And I think I lost $40. And that's devastating for a 15-year-old back in those days.
Hmm.
And I never played again. Being aware of yourself physically when you're walking down the street. Don't run into people. That makes you a jerk and a danger. Don't cross the street. That is your responsibility, fool. Sorry.
Hmm.
Don't drink the water that smells like sewage. That's your responsibility.
Hmm.
And some of this is just common sense. And today, because of psychological manipulation and the ability to use all the technology as an amplifier, as a communications and distribution mechanism, yeah, it's your responsibility to recognize when somebody's trying to take advantage of you, somebody's trying to defraud
Hmm.
you, somebody's trying to
Hmm.
manipulate you, and learning how to recognize that manipulation is a huge amount of the effort in cognitive security and trying to merge it with cybersecurity. It's the same issues, just instead of going after computers, they're going after this.
Yeah. So, in the basis, I do agree with you. I think there is definitely a personal responsibility going on, and if you use technology in a certain way, you have to know at least what the risks are, and then investigate those risks so you know how to deal with them if they come forward. So, in essence, I agree with you. Let me give you an example. Um, because you mentioned walking through red light as an example. That's where I would push back a little bit, because walking through a red light, everybody knows that, what the green light and what the red light means. Walking through a red light is a conscious decision to break the law in that case. That's different, I think, than being called up and being victimized by somebody who pretends to be someone else. That's a different thing, I think. What do you think the difference is between those two?
Okay, I think I'm going to cross the street and all that. I don't even know there's a red light
Hmm.
because I'm not aware of my surroundings. When you hyper focus on something, you lose the big picture. So a lot of people, drivers and walkers and bicyclists, absent-mindedly using the phone, you being distracted. One of the
Right. Yeah.
huge techniques that advertisers use in order to make you buy stuff, and the bad guys use to get you to do what they want you to do, is attention. That's why they call it the attention economy. Pay more attention to my toilet paper than his.
Hmm.
Oh, then I better go buy yours, of course. Pay more attention to me because you're going to lose 5,000 euros if you don't do what I say right away. And this stuns people's minds. And it's every bit of it is emotional. It's not a technical attack against the brain. It's an emotional attack. It's cognitive.
Yeah, and that especially nowadays, the word attention is becoming a very big word because every piece of social media, and whenever you're talking about TikTok or Instagram or any of these other platforms, they're trying to, or even companies like Netflix or anything that we as consumers consume, it's made. Even the platforms that this podcast, for example, is being published on, everything is made and everything is organized in such a way that it tries to keep your attention for as long as possible. So the argument that you're laying out is not necessarily, okay, walking through a red light is a conscious decision and being victimized is not. So that's a difference. Your argument is more in both situations, you're being distracted from focusing on what you need to focus on.
I would love to have a really proper argument with you over in Amsterdam when I see you in September. But yes, it's all about attention and emotionally compelling. What am I more attracted to?
Mm.
Do I really like bread more than milk? Which one do I pay more attention to? And let me give you another example that is not well known. A lot of people, too many people say, I know how to multitask. Don't worry about it. There is no such thing as multitasking. I repeat, multitasking does not exist. All you're doing
Agreed.
is shifting your attention from here to there to here to there
Yeah.
and doing a piss poor job of it. Do
Hmm.
one thing well.
Hmm.
One thing well, focus on it, and then move on to something else. The brain, the way this machine works, is point to point to point to point. It only can do one thing at a time, despite anything your shrink, your teachers, or your parents told you. No, it can do one thing at a time, and it's really, really slow.
Yeah, and every time you switch, it costs time.
Costs time and it costs energy. It costs
Yeah,
calories.
right.
And part of the goal of many attackers is what I call TMI, too much information. It's information overload. Because as soon as you start bombarding people with that, their ability to critically ignore, critically think, make decisions, uh, all starts getting distorted. And when I'm crossing the street, red light, no red light, in order to survive, I need to be around, know my surroundings. In order to survive in an intellectual or a cognitive world, I need to know my surroundings and how the attack vectors work. How does my mind get manipulated? This is what cognitive security is all about, and putting it into the same phrasing and the same terminology that we use in cybersecurity. TMI in cybersecurity, what do we call it?
The DOS attack.
So when you take all of the cybersecurity kind of stuff that we know,
Hmm.
and then you take cognitive security, you can map it all together. It's just two different systems. Two different systems. One is silicon, one is carbon.
Hmm.
Approach them the same way and answers start appearing.
Let's get into this straight away, because for that person that is listening to this conversation right now and who doesn't know where to start, right? Who is looking outside of this world and is seeing a hugely complex world filled with all kinds of technology and there's no way to begin. I just want to use my phone. I just want to use my laptop and I don't know all the jibber jabber, of the technical person. I don't know how it works. What kind of practical tips could you give that person to not necessarily fix every or close every security hole that there is, but to at least put the basics down? What kind of advice would you give that person?
Get an IT psychiatrist.
IT psychiatrist. So the local nephew around the corner.
No, that's exactly right. Whether it is the nephew, I have no idea how to fix a car. None. I understand the systems underneath of it, and I know enough to know, let somebody else open it up and fix it. You have to, number one, recognize that, yeah, you're being overwhelmed. Yeah, there's just too much technology here. Number two, be very, very specific about what you want to do. Well, I want to do a lot of stuff. That's not an answer. Well, there's a lot of stuff that I want to learn about. That's not an answer. Right now, today, tell me everything that you need to do. And in business, we call that specifications, a business plan, lots of terminology. How can I help you if you don't even know what you want to do?
Mhm.
So that's the first thing. And then obviously getting a guy, getting somebody that you can trust that will help walk you through it and be on call if you get yourself into trouble. And the final thing is trust nothing. Verify it twice.
How do you verify it twice? When somebody, for example, is calling you with that bank story, how do you verify it?
In that case, it's real simple. Hey, can you give me your phone number? What's your extension number? I'll call the main number of the bank and call you right back. And that is, in our terms, two-factor authentication, or a version of that. And in cognitive terms, it's trust nothing, verify twice. It's same stuff. It's identical.
Yeah.
Just looking at it slightly differently.
Yeah, very fair. There's also one that I really like and that I think is really important, because humans are emotional creatures. We are right. If we start yelling at each other, we become upset. That's literally how humans work. So if you notice that you're getting the feeling of urgency, or that you're getting angry, or that you're getting fearful, or anything like that during a conversation with a stranger, or with somebody who says they're from the government or from the bank or from any other institution that you deem important, but you feel that feeling of urgency, you need to take action now or else, right? That is, in my opinion, also a marker for a conversation like that.
It's exactly the same thing as from people selling. This is a one-day offer. You can buy it today, and that's out. It's gone.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
there are very specific psychological analyses, and it's understood very, very well with the urgency to buy. And it's like they're selling you a condo or a timeshare or whatever. You can have the car today, but the sale's over. I can save you 3,000 euros now, but tomorrow it's going to be 3,000 more. True, not true? Probably. I don't know if it is or not, but it's a technique. Same thing with security, because all they're doing is going after your mind. They're not going after your technology. They know better. That's not the weakness. The weakness is your mind.
So your latest book, The Art of Science of Meta War, introduces the concept of meta war, and you define it as the art and science of creating immersive experiences to influence, alter, and define one's sense of reality. I think this also ties into what we just discussed when we were talking about a person's reality. Could you break this concept down for me? What is the meta war?
Meta war is the use of hostile techniques. It's the art of manipulating your mind. It's the art and science of, I know how the brain, the bad guys know how the brain works, know how decisions are made. We've got 100 years of research on this. We know exactly, or not exactly, we know very well how this works. And meta war is the combination of cyber and cognitive processes, silicon systems carbon systems, they meet each other, and that's what we're living right now, the meeting of these, and the two of them don't work so well together. And meta war is the bad guys taking advantage of it, and cognitive security and cognitive security awareness is getting people to recognize it. We have security awareness in the traditional cybersecurity world. We don't have yet cognitive security awareness, so where people can be aware of their own biases, their own fallacies, their own weaknesses, which may not be comfortable for a lot of people, because as you say, we're all emotional creatures. But that is the way forward, absolutely, is to get the world around us as perceived by our typically five senses, and to be able to call out, that's not right. That's bullshit, and I know it. And understand critical ignoring, understanding critical thinking. Doesn't happen overnight. Fixing a IT system, making it secure, takes a while too.
Mhm.
But we know pretty well how to strengthen the mental immune system to make people more resilient against these sorts of hyper-focused social engineering and cognitive attacks.
And how do you do that at scale? Because the campaigns to make people aware of cyber threats, of phishing, of whatever, they have been around for as long as I can remember. So at least until the 90s. Yet the problem still persists, right? And we just discussed about responsibility. So I think we agree that people have responsibility to investigate the technologies that they're using, but people also have to prioritize what they spend attention, what they give their attention to. And if for whatever reason they come to the conclusion that they shouldn't prioritize this, and I know people like that, people for example around me, they, for example, my wife, usually what happens is I make sure that the device that she uses are secure and are properly configured, and the permissions that individual applications have, have the right, are configured in such a way that they are enabled where they should be enabled because we are using that, and they are disabled where we are like, yeah, you don't need local access to all our devices locally, right? That's not needed for a for a maps application, for example, right? But still, the question stands: with all these campaigns and all this effort that has been done already, how can we reach a point where everybody knows what to do and how to protect themselves, at least on this landscape?
Never will. There is no such thing as perfect security. The only thing we can do is make it better. The only way to make it perfect is to turn it off. The only way for humans to make it perfect is don't interact with technology at all, get off the grid, get a bow and arrow, and go find a bear to eat. The coexistence of technology and humanity is a prerequisite for the survival of our species. If we do not learn how to coexist with technology in a way that we just don't give up, in a way that is healthy
Mm-hmm.
and works both ways, if we don't do it, the species is over. So 30 years, 40 years.
Do you think this problem is being amplified or is becoming smaller with the introduction now of AI?
Oh, Christ. AI can do it in a thousand times faster. That's what political and religious manipulation, that's what we're seeing across election interference and all of that everywhere on the planet right now, because of the amplifying factors of AI and the very poor job we've done with identity management for the last 40 some years, is that anybody with a decent program can create an identity and become one of the voices in the echo chamber.
One of the Twitter bots, for example.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're all the same. And it's because of poor identity management. Period. Unless there's a human being specifically identifiable behind each one, it's not real. It's not real. Unless there is evidence, unless there is proof. And evidence is part of this whole issue with misinformation, disinformation. Is there evidence? Okay, birds aren't real. All right, you know that, right? You know that birds are government-controlled machines to eavesdrop on us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and every now and then they bump into the window.
Every now and then they do that because
Mhm.
the GPS controls from the hostile CNC controller. All right. Now, let's say I was trying to convince you that, or somebody's trying to
Mhm.
convince me. Show me some evidence. Well, everybody knows it.
Mhm.
Well, show me some evidence. Go look it up yourself. It's all on the internet.
That's where confirmation bias comes in.
Well, it's worse than that. There's over 20 biases that we address at CSI. The fallacies, all of this. These are all
Mhm.
logical issues that your brain has. When you went to school, you learned your ABCs, not how to detect bullshit. Now, what are they doing in Finland? What are they doing in Finland, you might well ask? The entire school system of Finland, beginning with toddlers, is teaching them how to detect bullshit. And go look it up. It's real. The Finnish educational system, there's been a mandate to make the entire country mentally resilient. A similar effort has been going on by a dear friend of mine in Sweden. So the Scandinavian countries and the Baltics, uh, they are all taking major action on this in order to get it to scale. I've put out some propositions on taking things to scale. They are in the book. The EU really, they've invested $95 billion on a project, a 10-year project to build mental resilience into entire populations. So there is a lot of effort at it, a lot of effort going on. There is no one answer.
Mhm.
It will never be perfect. We can make it better and better and better, and there is a limit as to how good it can be. And in the book, we can get into all the math and everything, but there is a limit of where we think. And most experimental psychologists believe that if we reach what is called a 1 sigma, 68.4% of populations starting to act with the technology better and better, we can create a generational shift that'll take 20 years. But that is sort of the thinking right now. Not proving it. I'm not saying it's fact. I'm saying that's how we're thinking about it.
I'm interested in this concept of identity management because this is actually something that came forward in my mind also a couple of weeks ago. How? So I know that in the past there have been a couple of initiatives, and I can't ban them by name. And even if I knew them by name, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't mention them by name. But there have been initiatives to create like a central identity management platform, which would be a website, and then you go to the website, you make an account, you link all the accounts, you prove that you own the accounts, and therefore you can go to the page and that you see that those are connected. That's an initiative. Another example is actually something that I did today. Is on my LinkedIn profile. Today, I linked my government ID to my LinkedIn profile. So now there's a checkbox behind my name that shows this person is verified. But the first example is just a website that shows that you are the owner, or at least not necessarily the owner, but you have control over a certain social media account, for example. And the other is limited to a specific platform that you are on. So both of them don't solve the problem of proving on the internet that you are who you say you are. And the question that I would ask you here then is how do you how because I think it makes a lot of sense to on the internet have in an ideal situation a differentiation between machines and between people, so that there would be some kind of mechanism where you could go on the internet and you would see that if there's communication going on between you and someone or something else, you could see it's that person or it's that robot, right? And there might be a very valid reason for it to be a bot because, for example, it's automatic newsletters or anything like that. But you could differentiate between them. And you can see that the person that talks to you actually exists. So that will solve the issue then of one person creating a million different Twitter bots to spam the whole network with misinformation about whatever topic is important at that moment. Well, there's also a privacy related issue in there because, if there might be reasons why people don't want to show their face on the internet, but let's keep that aside for now. My question specifically is about identity management. Is there something right now that you know of that comes close to this centralized identity management on the internet? Or do you know of a initiative that goes towards that? What's your general idea of that?
I've read about them. I don't live in IDM. It's in my world of systems. All right, there's IDM people. You guys kind of work on that.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a fan of the central repository at all. Reason, politics, ownership, and technically single point of failure.
Yeah.
You get in there, done.
You're done. Yeah.
So we need a distributed control mechanism that has proof of identity, and without having those identities, with having basically an identity check mark, yes, verified, re-verified, re-vetted. For example, there in the US for airports, there's a thing called Clear, and it gets you bypassing security because you're verified and you're a good guy and all that. But you got to go through a whole set of paperwork and proof and all of that in order to do it. In order to get a passport, you have to have physical proof of human being through some system.
Mm-hmm.
Banking, have to do the same thing. Driver's license, no, maybe not in the US, but over in other countries, there's other levels of proof. So when my identity is out there, is it verified? By what mechanism is it verified? What are the compromises that could be made to that verification system? We're not there yet because the issue is emotional. I have the right to be anonymous, and we bring into that concept. Go look at the PGP arguments from 35 years ago. Do we want the internet to be anonymous as it is today, or should it be 100% IDM verified? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or do you have some places that you go where your identity doesn't matter? And we don't have those answers because they're cultural answers. And for the social media people, it's money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a real incentive over there.
Answer is not easy. Again, in MetaWar, there's a lot of different ideas and approaches that technically would work. Perfectly, no, but certainly help a whole hell of a lot. But the chances of any of the big tech or ad tech companies actually implementing it,
Yeah.
because it'll cost them billions and billions of dollars to do things for the good of the community, to be socially responsible.
Let's play this out. So let's forget the financial cost and let's forget adoption for now. Let's assume those are not an object here. When you were laying this out, because in the beginning when we talked about identity management, you said, this is one of the problems with that is that it's a single point of failure. So if that gets attacked or goes down, then you have a big problem because then all of a sudden, the whole system doesn't work
Same
anymore.
thing that happened with the Dutch authentication. They had the digital authentication company in Holland.
GeoTrust, I believe it's called.
And they got hacked and everything, toast, gone. So,
hi everyone. A small correction here. The organization was actually called DigiNotar, a Dutch certificate authority that was hacked in June of 2011 and issued hundreds of fake certificates, which then opened the door to certain types of cyber attacks. The company was declared bankrupt shortly after. All right, back to the episode. Yeah, that caused quite a stir in not just Netherlands, but worldwide, because it was, I believe, one of the 6 or 7 big parties that did identity management for all kinds of systems. Yeah. But Okay, so let's look at this specifically from a technical standpoint. And I'm gonna bring blockchain forward because my question in essence comes down to, would blockchain be an option here? But let me flesh it out for a little bit. The concept for everybody who's listening of blockchain is that there is a decentralized ledger of information that lives and is updated on multiple locations at once. This is also the technology that, for example, Bitcoin runs on. And the idea is that you can, if you have access to one of those ledgers and you try to mess around with those, the whole network will kick you out because the whole network will see, hey, wait a second, you're doing something you're not allowed to do. So the that prevents single point of failure in the manipulation sense, in the sense of that if one of those nodes, one of those endpoints, let's say, gets misused, that the whole network becomes compromised. So, okay, let me just give you the view that I have in mind right now. If you have a system that operates with the blockchain technology, and every citizen in the world would get inputted in that in some way, whatever the way is, in some way they get inputted into that ledger, into that blockchain chain technology. And what if, by world law or whatever, all the internet systems that we use are grabbing that identity from there? So in order to use social media, in order to browse, in order to use any internet whatsoever, you would need to use your ID, which has been assigned to you when you were born, and that is inputted in that ledger. That is a vision. How does that sound?
You read my book. One of the things that is in there is saying using a blockchain-like distributed ledger concept. Blockchain itself is too big, too bloaty, takes up too much planetary energy, and eats too many trees. But the fundamental technology behind it, the model, is spot on. So give me a lightweight blockchain. Some people say Ethereum. And I'm not an expert enough in all of the distributed ledger systems, but somebody's going to come up with one that will work for this. Because I fully agree. The biggest thing to build into that as well is that once you have that identity, the process of identity and verification has to be such as reasonably unspoofable. And so governments and no NGO, no private, nobody can have access to the whole thing, which is part of the reason for distributed ledgers, of course.
Define spoofable for everybody who's listening.
Oh, sorry, it's movable. That I cannot pretend to be you. You cannot pretend to be me unless you've maybe cut off my thumb, ripped out my eyeballs, killed me, gotten my ledger keys, very extreme physical violence. You want it to be electronically. And then in that case, if it's done properly, you're only going to get my account. There was a thing recently, some guy, it was another contact of mine, says, hey, we just got nailed. We lost our ledger ID. How can we get it back? You can't. Well, why not? Because that's the way it's designed. That's your personal responsibility to protect yourself. So, yeah, the idea spot on, absolutely, and I explore it in the book as well, absolutely, with combining some of these technologies. Yes.
Yeah, it makes a lot from a technical standpoint. It makes a lot of sense to do it like that. But the problem is the scale you have to operate on. Because if you have to implement it, if you want to implement something like that, you can't do it in phases. Well, technically you can do it in phases because you can decide to enable certain platforms at the same time, and then you can
And your
say
identity carries a verification flag that'll refer back
exactly,
to,
yeah,
yes, technically we know how to do this shit. We do.
yeah,
But it
yeah,
goes back to people's, oh, that's intruding on my rights. All right, then don't shop at Walmart online. Fine, not my problem. Um, well, I need to be anonymous in order to help my people. Then be anonymous and live in that off the grid anonymous area. Okay, go for it. This is not 100% of the people, 100%. It's take the existing high volume internet people around the planet and do that.
What do you think of the way that Elon Musk solved it with X?
I don't know. I'm not. I've never. I don't like Twitter. I don't like X, just on principle, because I can't say anything in 140 characters.
Okay, so so aside from it being a social media platform, I think the technical solution that they implemented is quite interesting. So let me know what you think about this, because what they did before. So when X was not X yet, but it was still Twitter under the old owner. The way it worked is you as an account, if you had an account, you could get confirmed, approved. You get like this blue checkbox behind your name, right? But it was at the discretion of the team, of the Twitter team. So the Twitter team would say, okay, this account gets it or that account gets it. So most people in the world wouldn't get it at all. The new system, the new way it works is that you can purchase, you can pay a price, and what happens then is you still get the checkbox, but the higher the tier is, so the higher the plan is that you purchase, the more weight your account gets. So if you are commenting, for example, the probability of that comment showing up on somebody else's feed is higher. So if we take that financial aspect away for now and we just look at the weighting thing, so we can make the argument that in your solution we can do what you just said. So if you want to be a verified account and you want to be part of that system and you want to have the weight that verification carries, you have to be verified. If you want to be, and then you can do that system, and then your account carries more weight, let's say. If you want to be anonymous, that's perfectly fine, but then know that you're missing out on some things. Either, for example, in a social media setting, your visibility is just way lower, or yeah, I'm not even sure what another example there would be, but the weight that account carries is just lower.
Yeah, well, the problem with waiting becomes one of net neutrality. I give you more money and I get more popular. I got a big problem with that.
Right. Okay.
That is socially irresponsible on the part of anybody providing a public service or critical infrastructure.
So how do we connect these two then?
How do we do it now? We do it right now. We do it on the entire internet through ICANN.
Can you break it down?
ICANN and the DNS system, they all talk to each other. They all have high degrees of reliability.
Mm-hmm.
The centralized management or of the system, they're not arbitrators. They are system administrators of something else that's been arbitrated. So if you're going to create a new blockchain for IDM, it's got to be managed by a company that can't hack it either. It's a management issue in that case. How do I create the process? Okay, you have to give us $25 a year in order to get an IDM. And every year we're going to do a revetting and a re-verification of you through this process. Once you have that, that ties into our blockchain-like system, and you can use that as your authentic check mark wherever the hell you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I've got to remove it from the politics and the control people and all of the folks that are running things. There should be zero outside visibility into how that's into the details of the IDM in that system.
Should that system be open source? So should people be able to verify how it works?
Anything, any security should be open source.
Why do you think that?
Well, because the bad guys are going to figure it out sooner or later. You go back to cryptography 101.
Mm-hmm.
I have a proprietary algorithm. So what? Go away. Well, it's stronger than NSA's. Has NSA said that? Verification, evidence. No, but it's really strong, and we have a mathematician. Fuck your mathematician. No. Bullshit. It's got to be open source. All crypto, all good crypto is open source.
Mm-hmm.
All good security got to be open source. Otherwise, you're not secure. You're just security by obscurity. And we have been doing that and are still doing it too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the idea there is by making it open source, you allow everybody to verify what's in there. And if everybody looks at it, the probability of people with good intentions picking out something that is wrong in that piece of code allow it to be fixed on time before the bad guys figure it out.
And that is where a centralized global group like ICANN, I'm just picking them because it's doable.
Yeah.
It is doable. And yeah, $25, 20, but periodic revetting and re-verification has got to be part of it. If you remember the spies in the U.S., Aldrich James, CIA, Robert Hansen, FBI, they were both senior Soviet counterintelligence agents at CIA and FBI. Both of them were Russian assets, Soviet assets. How did they not get detected? Aldrich James paid $700,000 cash for a house and had Mercedeses and Jaguars. They didn't revet. You have to periodically revet the security of any process because its only value is the last time you measured it, which is a concept from quantum mechanics that I apply over here. The only time you know something in quantum mechanics is when you measure it. And after that, you have broken the field equations and nothing works anymore. Same thing with vetting. If I vetted you, let's say we have this system, and I vet you once a year, is that good enough? I'm going to vet you once a month. How often should I vet you in order to re-verify that you're really a human? Now, on my version of this, I get re-vetted every 3 days. Does it apply to my entire life everywhere? No, it just applies right now to this device. How often should you revet the chief financial officer of a company that makes billions of dollars? How often is good? What should the underwriters say? These are questions of responsibility at the organizational level, at societal level. Again, what is the responsibility for us to vet you, and what is your responsibility as the individual to revet us? It works two ways.
Yeah, and there's also a balance that you have to strike because vetting something or someone, the frequency of it depends on the context of the environment. But there's also a balance to strike because obviously the more you do it, the more intensive it is, and then the less quality or the less added benefit it has.
In my book, Analog Network Security, all of the mathematics on how to do this is there. All of the charts, every single bit of it is there. We have the mathematics. We know the technology. It needs to be, somebody has to care. It's like going back to 1991. Nobody gave a shit what I was saying back then. So now I'm saying, okay, here's how it's done. This is the way it works. I'm not a vendor. I'm not going to make a product. I really like my life the way it is thinking. But go over there. Those are the formulas on how to make this work. Nobody cares enough because security, as you said earlier, is just a minuscule part of the amount that's spent at any organization.
What do you think that is? Is that ignorance? Is that complacency? What is that?
Ignorance, apathy, and arrogance.
It will never happen to me.
Apathy, I don't care. Nothing. I got nothing that you want to see. You can have my Twitter password. There's nothing there.
Right.
And then ignorance is, fuck, I don't know. I don't know, and I don't care. I don't know. I'm just gonna bye. And those are the three fundamental cognitive failures that occur at the organizational level.
Yeah. Yeah. Not just on the organizational level, at humans in general.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, but I got to pick on somebody. I don't want to pick on.
Gotta go for management.
Yeah, if it's not good management porn, it's not worth it.
Yeah, but this also goes back to what you said earlier when I asked you like how do you solve that and how do you bring everybody to the point that they can take care of their own device and their own technology and their own security, where your answer was, and I think pretty logically, you can't, right? But you can try to improve it. You can try to make it better.
Yeah. Yeah, there is no absolutes. Again, if you get into MetaWar, if you get into analog network security, the entire universe is missing two numbers. You know what they are? 0 and 1.
Hold on a second. The universe is missing a 0 and a 1. What do you mean exactly?
The universe is here, right?
Yeah,
So it's not a 0.
exactly. Yeah.
Is it complete?
Depends on how you look at it. Depends on who you ask.
Right. Depends upon who you ask. That becomes opinion.
Right. Okay. So it's not absolute, you say.
And in quantum physics, same thing. In analog network security with the math, so all that, there are no absolutes. The only absolute in network security is turn the fucker off. Now you're going to load all of this stuff on my computer and tell me I'm secure. No, because I'm still in the equation.
When we talked earlier about the responsibility to okay, so again, this is iterating the exact same point, right? That you can't bring everybody to that point that they are secure. But it's not just that the people can take action themselves. It can also be done by companies. So let me give you a very good example, and maybe you can point out how this is flawed, if it is flawed, and if there's better examples. But a very good example in my case that comes forward is Apple devices. I think that Apple devices do a pretty good job at making sure that people have their basics in order. So if you use an iPhone or a MacBook, right, and you go to a new website and you want to make an account, what that device will do is it will generate a new password for you automatically and store it in a secure enclave environment. The same goes for the iPhone. And there's a couple of techniques that those devices are using that users do not have to take any action for. They just work. It's a very simple idea that the moment that you, let me give you a second example. That's the last one. Stolen devices, right? An internal problem. You can steal somebody's device, and yeah, you can log in because there's a password on it, but you can reset them, and then it's your device, right? Then nobody knows nobody knows it's stolen. It's just your device. Apple devices don't allow that to the point of individual hardware. So if you take a Mac and you take the keyboard out and you put that keyboard in another device, it won't work because that keyboard is linked technically to the to the secure enclave, which contains your Apple ID in this case. And that is how it is protected. So if you steal a MacBook, yeah, good luck. It's literally worthless metal to you. And the same for an iPhone. There's nothing you can do with it. You can barely use the frame, and that's it. My point there is, users don't have to do anything for it. Yet the security measures that are being taken and that are active on those devices are pretty damn powerful. So maybe we shouldn't. Well, you should still obviously do campaigns to make sure that people are aware of the dangers that are focused on them, like again those phishing calls and those social engineering calls. But there's also a very big responsibility on the companies creating technology, whatever the technology is, to make sure that their users can use it securely, assuming they don't know how it technically works.
Apple has always done a better job than everybody else because they're single platform, single version. Android, there's 100 different versions.
Yeah.
Windows, you can fuck it up all day long so easily on the distro from the manufacturer. Acer's version, I'm not picking on Acer, but in Dell's version, you don't know what's going on.
They're being copied and they're being filled with their own software by these manufacturers.
Exactly. So Apple, yes, has also a greater danger of a little bit of single point of failure as a result of their model that we have seen.
Yeah.
With some of the iCloud hacks that have occurred.
Right.
And so that was an iCloud problem. And iCloud is a single point of failure in their ecosystem. And I'm not knocking Apple here. I hate products. I hate talking about vendors because there's problems everywhere and it's somebody else's. They're better at looking at the details on that than I am. I'm looking at the whole system. And if you tell me that Apple's better, yeah, I understand how, okay, that's great. It doesn't make it perfect because I've still got a great cognitive attack surface.
Yeah, it's a balance between both. The technology can enable us to become more secure, and to some degree, there are vendors that are and developers that are very conscious of that. And good developers take security into account, but it is also a responsibility of the people themselves to keep themselves secure and to take the right action.
On my Macs, I've got bunches of extra security stuff anyway,
Mhm.
because I'm a paranoid security guy,
Right.
and there's no reason not to do it.
You got your own modems, your own firewalls, and all those sorts of things.
No, inside of my network, I've got a set of rules, and that's fine. From me to the outside world, I've got hard blocks. I'm invisible. I'm in full stealth mode. But in the applications that accept information from outside is where I have the additional controls. And mostly they're go take a look, if they're automatic in the process in the chain. And it's just take a look at this, take a look at this, take a look at this. The web of trust is one of the ones that I like. That's automatically in the chain. So if I get linked somewhere, it'll give me a warning. It'll flag me. I still use antivirus and anti-malware software on all my machines just cause. And now to keep your machines clean with all of the crap that we're putting on them, you still need a tool for that. And I don't trust Apple to do it, and I don't trust anybody because Apple sucks at doing file management on its own systems. God, you can't hand it over. Cannot hand it over. That's back to ignorance. That's somebody else's problem. Perfect answer? Nope. Perfect problem? Yeah, because there is no answer.
All right, let's end with this. I have a couple of questions. Um, just again for the everyday people listening to this that are struggling with all sorts of different aspects of their security. So whether it's privacy, whether it's password management, whether it's how to go on the internet safely, whether it's how to do parenting. You know, if you have a kid that has a smartphone right now or has access to the internet, or if they don't have that access to the internet, you know, they have it at their friend's place. So how do you deal with that? Those kind of questions. So
What you do is you don't give the kid a phone, stay off the internet, and go play ball at the beach. Be a human being.
In principle, I certainly agree, but it seems not to be. That's not the way apparently it's going right now.
I've got a grandson, so we're going through this exactly, and my daughter and my son-in-law are both very technically fluent as well, so we are playing that game.
Okay, but let's start with that one then. So to people that have that have a that are parents of a child, let's say younger than 12, what advice would you give those parents or parents in general to protect their children from the dangers of the internet?
Your job as parents is to learn what's really going on. You got to go figure out what are your options. And again, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to keep your 12-year-old away from porn, away from gambling, away from your credit cards? What are you trying to do? What do you want his internet experience to be like? You're the parents. You choose. You have to start with the design specifications. What do you want? How do you want it to work?
Yeah, I think that most parents would say, I don't want my child to go to porn sites. I don't want my child to be cyberbullied on social media, and I don't want my child to be distracted from growing, you know, on school and focusing on school. I think those would be the three things that would come forward.
Cool. Then stay the hell off the internet and go to the beach. Because that's not, it's not gonna, it's gonna, they're gonna be cyberbullied if they're in a network. It's gonna happen.
Hmm.
Unless that network of kids is 4 or 5 people who are nice. Cyberbullying is the same way we were bullied in school when we were kids. No different. I'm going to go back to the parents. You have to define the experience. You run your home. You run their meals. You decide how they're going to grow up. Your job is to do the same thing, only now it's with technology, which means you probably need some help. You probably need somebody who can translate what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to do, how you want your kids to experience the world, and let them configure that for you. That's my best advice. That's what I tell people around when people ask me for help. I go, nope, I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you trying to do? And when you start asking those questions, you even ask them of professionals making business cases. Why do you need that? Well, I have to have it. Why do you need it? Well, I might need it. Why do you need it? And in business, these are tough questions anyway. You got to do the same thing with your kids.
Yeah.
Define the environment, define their experience.
I heard something, and I haven't really delved into this too much, so I can't really go too deep into it, but I heard something that's quite, well, not surprising, but quite weird in some way. And that is that very young children nowadays, they have a mechanism in mind that you and I don't have. And that is that mechanism that constantly tracks things like followers and reputation and interaction on all kinds of social media. To you and to me, that's just numbers, numbers on the platform, nothing more. To them, for as far as I understood it, it's their life. It has taken over their thinking. All the actions are aimed at increasing those numbers and increasing engagement.
Which is why everybody should know we feel first, we think second. It's all emotion. Control. This whole thing, it's about control and influence.
I bet it's a really hard struggle for parents because again, in principle, I do definitely agree with you. So the less exposure to I mean, you see it. A couple of weeks ago in Spain and in Portugal, the power went out for 24 hours. People didn't have any power anymore. And people went to their neighbors to get milk and they interacted with each other and they had the best time and they socialized with each other. They met their neighbors that live right next to them for the first time in 20 years. People had a lot of fun, and that's one side of the story, of course, because there's also things that went wrong. But the point there is that socially, it can do a whole lot of good to disconnect. So in principle, I 100% agree with you that the less exposure, the better. And I think that smartphone introduction to very young children is not a good idea. But the problem there is they grow up in an environment where those things are everywhere. So if they don't have them as very young children, their friends have them. And if they don't have them, that opens maybe the door also to things like cyberbullying. Like, hey, you don't have a smartphone. Everybody else does. What's wrong with you? Right? So I bet it's a very, very hard environment to deal with as a parent.
Yes. I refer people to the Finnish educational system, the Finnish government mandates, because from everything I have seen thus far, I have not seen a better way of thinking and approaching cognitive resilience and critical thinking.
Yeah.
And the last time I looked at it was honestly like a year ago. So what have they done more in the last year? I don't know. But the Finnish are coming in number one. I know the Danish are heavily involved in it. Obviously, Estonia has been probably the first digital country on the planet in many ways. They have a lot of those problems solved already. So I'm hoping to spend more time over in the Netherlands and getting a plane trips around to go study and learn more about how they're doing it right.
If anybody wants to look that up, what you just mentioned, what can they search for?
Finnish education misinformation. Maybe begin there. My wife was always a much better non-SQL searcher than I was, but once AI and all that came out, I don't think about search terms much anymore. I give it a complex problem.
Okay, just a few last ones. Let's talk about privacy and just privacy. if people ask the question, how can I improve, how can I better protect my privacy right now? And that's assuming that they have their standards, right? When it comes to the internet, they browse their news websites, they have maybe a Facebook account or a Twitter account or something like that. They just have a couple of basic things like anybody else does. How do they protect their privacy?
Before you do any of those applications, before you open them, before you open, whether it's Facebook or any of them, doesn't matter. When you click, I agree, you have just given away all rights to privacy. Right. You're done.
So don't sign up.
Again, I'm referring back to the book Meta War. There's an entire section in there that goes through what the EULA, end user license agreement, and none of us read them, but in there are hidden things that deny you your rights of privacy. You have given them away. They tell you exactly how they're going to use it. One of the most egregious ones is, I think it's Facebook, but I could be wrong. It says, we will not abuse your privacy, we promise, but we're going to share it with third-party people, but we have no control over how those third-party people are going to use it. Do you agree with this? Yep.
Yeah, we saw how that went a couple of years ago.
And so awareness, behavior, situational awareness in the physical realm, in the cyber realm, and in the cognitive realm. You have to be aware of where you exist and how you interact.
Okay, and for the people that have those accounts already, so they are already signed up, they have the Twitter account, they have the YouTube account.
They've already went up. Go visit the EULA, EULA, and in those, read what you have given away. Read the rights you have already agreed to giving away. It scares most people to do it. And we all do it. When you install that new update on your Apple, have you ever read what rights you're giving to Apple?
Nope. Not with Apple specifically, at least.
What have you read? Which EULA have you read specifically?
It's probably a couple of video game ones that were not as long. So there's like a video game that you start up, a game. Maybe I did it with Civilization 6, I think. That's maybe a one I went through. But yeah, when it comes to those big, none of the social media platforms, I went through it. Apple one, I didn't go through it. It's just too much information. It's just way too much.
Too much information. Das Infoglet.
Yeah.
We don't have the time, and they're written for lawyers. They're not written for you, from you and me.
Yeah.
You have to assume that whatever you do is going to come back and bite you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Not until some of these other alternative mechanisms are put in.
Are you familiar with the European GDPR?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that changes the story, at least in the European sense?
Yes, GDPR is much better than what we're doing here. I mean, we're I'm not going to go political, but things were bad enough before they got worse. So GDPR, I find it somehow amazing that 19 different countries could agree on something.
Yeah, so for everybody who's watching and listening who doesn't know what the GDPR is a European law called, and it's abbreviation for the General Data Protection Regulation. Within Netherlands, we specifically call it the AVG. I'm not sure what it stands for, but that's not really relevant for now. But the idea, I believe, that's also implemented in the GDPR is that you have things like the right to see the data that a company collects from you. So since I'm a European citizen, I could go to Facebook or to Twitter or to YouTube or in this case Google, because that's what YouTube falls under. Alphabet, actually, if we want to be specific. And I could knock on the door and I could say, send me all the data that you have of me. And then when I know that, and that will probably be something like an Excel file or a document or whatever format they send it in, I can enable or I can enact my right to be forgotten as long as it doesn't interfere with the law. So a very good example there is I could literally order a company to delete all my information unless they need to maintain it by law. So, for an example, there might be I'm doing business with a company. I pay the company something, and in order for them to do their taxes, which they need to be able to go 7 years back in time, they need to maintain my financial information plus my name for 7 years, because else they can't fulfill that that law that tells them to keep it for 7 years. But everything else that's not mandatory for that, they need to delete it and straight away without but or why.
It's far better than anything that we've got. Yeah. Yeah. Privacy in the U.S. has always been a bastard stepchild. No, I mean, the biggest work that happened in privacy over here was done out of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And with creating the program called Privacy by Design by Dr. Ann Kavukian.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been adopted worldwide by people that care. But other than that, privacy, no. There is no. Scott McNeely, the head of Sun Microsystems in 1995, I said in an interview, privacy, you have no privacy, get over it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all based upon trust, but that's a moving target as well. It can be measured, but it's a moving target.
Okay. And for our listeners, because even though I'm based in the Netherlands, the viewership from Netherlands for this podcast specifically doesn't come primarily from Netherlands. It comes primarily from Canada, from Australia, and from the United States. So specifically, let's talk about the United States, because what you're saying is the privacy laws over there are loose at least. What could people do there to protect their privacy better? And then I'm talking about specific technologies like VPNs. What do you think Americans can do to take more control over what kind of information they allow others to capture from them?
I use VPNs, but it has nothing to do with privacy, really. It has to do with when I'm traveling, open networks and things. I just want to be as invisible as I possibly can. But that's for the data in transit. What you're talking about is the data that is already there that Facebook has or Google has or somebody's got. That's out of the bag right now. That's done. You've already signed away that Facebook can,
It's already gone.
you can give away your information to trusted partners, but trusted partner is a complete bullshit term when it comes to it.
All right. I have one more, and this one is a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Posting your vacation photos with the missus or your drunk evening with the boys on social media. Good idea or bad idea, and why?
Oh, shit. That really depends. I have I'm not a big social media guy. I just, I got my friends. My daughter, on the other hand, she does that. If somebody wanted to target her, yeah, her information is, I mean, it's easy to use various technologies to find out all sorts of personal information just through the digital image alone. Yes. Will those photos impact her future career-wise or personally? Not at all. Now, if she and a bunch of women went to the Australian stripper bar down under, that's probably not a real good thing to post. One of the general rules, if you've noticed from all the hacker conferences over the years, there's been plenty of opportunity for pictures to be out there to be embarrassing for a lot of people. It doesn't really happen. The culture has evolved. Now, if you're playing Hacker Jeopardy and you're up on stage and we're making a fool out of you, that's on you, dude. That's on you. No, whatever's on the internet is going to potentially haunt you for life. You got to either decide to own it or get off the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's also very to build on top of that, and this is also what we discussed earlier. It's very important to know what you're doing because the enthusiasm of posting vacation. And I mentioned that this question was a little bit tongue in cheek, but to some degree, it is a very serious question because if you decide to post on Facebook your vacation and where you are at that moment, okay, so let's put our bad actor cap on. If I see a picture of someone on the internet and I see that they're on vacation, I know they're not home. And if I know where they're living, I can go visit. Right? It's a very simple example, but that can happen.
Sure, except in your posting, thank you, we have house sitters and taking care of the animals for us.
Yeah, that will be the second post then to protect the first one.
It's called deception and reverse deception.
Yeah.
Put the narrative that you create is the one people will believe initially.
All right, Winn. Is there anything that we didn't discuss today, but that we should have talked about?
Yeah, we didn't discuss 8,000 hours of important stuff on top of all this. And that is why Cognitive Security Institute, it's cognitivesecurity.institute. Come on down, join up, global volunteer organization. Some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life.
Tell me about that institute. What do they do? What do they do? What do they focus on?
There's three areas. One is R&D, research into experimental psychology, neurophysics, neuroscience, plasticity, and all of that. The second is the community, establishing a central place for people of like mind, like ISSA, like a big security organization where you provide community services, educational opportunities, information exchange, events, and what have you. And then the third is skills development in order to get organizations, individuals to understand what is required to improve cognitive resilience, and then the tools development for those, and ultimately their use in enterprise.
All right, so people can look that up. I'll also make sure to put any of the research that you mentioned down in the description. That includes also your books that you released over, I think, the last couple of decades, I believe. When the first one was in the 90s, right?
My first book was in 89.
89.
No, I wrote one before that, but nobody cares about that one. I had one in 83, 82. I forgot about that. That sucked. If you go to my web Amazon page, Winn Schwartau author, they're all there. A lot of them are for free right now. Have a ball, and there's a couple you still need to pay for.
Copy that. Winn Schwartau, thank you very much.
Thank you. This has been a lot of fun, but now I need more coffee.